They say cruise ships are floating paradises, but what if I told you that behind the laughter, buffets, and ocean views, some cabins never let you leave? Tonight, you'll hear 4 real encounters, verified, cross-checked, and chilling beyond belief. These aren't just stories. These are confessions from people who swore they'd never set foot on a ship again. So settle in, dim the lights, and if you dare sail with us into the dark, subscribe to Midnight Outcry and hit that bell, because you won't want to miss what's waiting below deck. I don't know if anyone will believe me, but there's something I need to get off my chest before I lose my mind completely. I'm not telling you this for sympathy. I'm telling you because someone out there needs to hear it. Because maybe, just maybe, if you ever book a cruise, you'll know to look twice before you step into an elevator that doesn't belong. My name's Daniel Rivera. I'm 34, and I work in IT back in Orlando. I'm not much of a vacation guy. I'm more the type who saves money and works late nights fixing servers for companies that don't even remember my name. But my sister convinced me I needed a break. She found this week-long Caribbean cruise deal, insisted it would recharge me. Sunshine, free food, ocean air, all the things I didn't know I was missing. I wasn't thrilled about being crammed on a floating hotel with 3,000 strangers, but she bought me the ticket as an early birthday gift. So I went. I kept telling myself, what's the worst that could happen? The first day felt like what you'd expect. The check-in process, the crowd, the overwhelming smell of sunscreen mixed with the faint tang of diesel as the ship pulled away from port. I remember the announcement echoing through the atrium as the captain welcomed everyone aboard. My cabin was small but clean, with a little porthole looking out to the endless blue. The bed was softer than I expected, and the air conditioning hummed low, steady, almost comforting. By dinner that night, I started to relax. The buffet was absurd. Tables piled with shrimp, roast beef, fruit displays carved into swans. My sister laughed at me when I went back for my 3rd plate. I remember thinking, maybe this won't be so bad after all, but then something small, barely noticeable, happened that first night. We were exploring the ship after dinner, wandering past the shops and lounges, when I saw it. At the very end of a quiet corridor, tucked away behind a set of decorative plants, there was an elevator. No one else seemed to notice it. It wasn't like the others. This one didn't have polished chrome or a glowing display above the door. It was plain, almost industrial, with a brushed steel surface that looked older than the rest of the ship. I thought it was just a service elevator, the kind crew used to haul linens and luggage. But the odd thing was, the door opened when I walked past. I swear I hadn't pressed anything, but with a faint hiss, it slid open just enough for me to see inside. There were no lights, no carpet, just a metal box with a single button panel on the inside. And the weirdest part? Instead of the usual numbers, the panel only had one button, a down arrow. I laughed nervously and nudged my sister, but when I looked back, it was closed. She asked me what I was staring at, but when I pointed, there was nothing there. Just the wall and the plants. I brushed it off as me being overtired. Maybe I imagined it. Still, that night as I lay in my cabin, I couldn't shake the image of that elevator door sliding open on its own. The next day was brighter. We docked at Nassau, and the sun was blazing, the water that surreal turquoise color you only see in travel magazines. I tried to enjoy it, drank a beer on the deck, watched kids splash in the pool, let the salty wind sting my face. Everything was normal. But that night, when the ship was quiet again, I found myself walking down that same corridor. I don't even know why. Some part of me wanted to prove to myself it wasn't real. And sure enough, there it was again. The same elevator, same brushed steel door. This time, the light above it flickered faintly, like a candle about to go out. I froze when the door opened again. A low metallic groan echoed in the hall. Inside, the button glowed faintly red, the down arrow waiting for someone to press it. And then I heard something, not loudly, but just enough, a sound drifting up from inside the shaft. It wasn't the hum of machinery, it was Voices. Whispers. I couldn't make out the words, but they rose and fell like 100 people murmuring together. My throat went dry. I turned to leave, but for just a split second, I swear I saw someone inside the elevator. A man. Tall, thin, wearing what looked like a faded uniform. He was standing in the corner, half in shadow, just watching me. Then, the doors shut. And when I stepped back and blinked, again, it was gone. The wall was solid. No elevator. I didn't sleep that night. Every time the air conditioner kicked on, I thought I heard those whispers again. By day 3, I started to notice something even stranger. Other passengers. Or rather, the way they reacted when I mentioned that corridor. At breakfast, I casually asked one of the servers if that hallway near the shops led to a staff area. He froze. His polite smile faltered just for a second before he shook his head and said, "No, sir, there's nothing there." Later, by the pool, I asked a couple we'd met the night before if they'd seen an elevator tucked behind the plants near the shops. The husband frowned and said, "There's no elevator there, man. You're probably mixing it up with the ones near the casino." His wife quickly changed the subject. It was subtle, but it felt like people didn't just not know about it. They didn't want to talk about it. And here's the part where I need you to listen carefully, because this is where things started to go wrong. That night, night 3, I couldn't help myself. I went back. Alone this time. I don't know what I expected. Maybe that the elevator wouldn't be there at all, and I'd laugh at myself for obsessing. Maybe I wanted proof I wasn't going crazy. But when I reached the corridor, the air felt heavier. The plants that had been so neatly arranged before looked wilted, like they hadn't been watered in days. And the lights in the hall seemed dimmer, flickering faintly, though everywhere else on the ship was bright and clean. The elevator was waiting. The doors slid open slowly, as if it had been expecting me, and this time I heard it clearly. A voice. It wasn't a whisper anymore. It was a woman's voice, low and distorted, echoing from deep inside the shaft. "Daniel." My blood turned to ice. There is no way she could have known my name. I stumbled back, heart slamming against my ribs. The doors closed, sealing whatever was inside back in darkness. And when I turned to run, I realized I wasn't alone in the corridor anymore. Someone was standing at the far end, watching me. I blinked, and they were gone. But I swear to you, whoever it was looked exactly like me. I didn't tell my sister what happened that night. How could I? She already thought I was paranoid for wandering the halls at all hours. If I'd told her that I'd seen an elevator that didn't exist, that I'd heard my name whispered inside it, and that I'd seen myself watching from the end of the corridor, she would have dragged me to the onboard doctor. But I couldn't just ignore it either. Every time I closed my eyes, I kept replaying the way the doors opened, the way that distorted voice had curled around my name. The next morning, I forced myself to join her at the pool, act normal. The deck was crowded with people in swimsuits, the air filled with the smell of sunscreen and grilled burgers, kids laughing and splashing in the water. But the whole time, I felt watched. Not by any one person, just watched. Around noon, as we were eating, an announcement came over the PA. The captain's calm voice. "Ladies and gentlemen, for your safety, please note that certain staff-only areas of the vessel are restricted. Passengers are not permitted in maintenance corridors or service elevators." I froze, burger halfway to my mouth. Why that announcement? Why now? I glanced at my sister, but she didn't seem to notice. She was scrolling through her phone, laughing at something. That night, I told myself I wasn't going back. I promised myself I'd stay in the cabin, watch the sea roll by, and just forget it. But around midnight, I heard it again. Through the thin walls of the cabin, over the steady hum of the air conditioner, I heard that same voice. Faint, distant, but clear enough. "Daniel." I sat up, sweating. My sister was asleep, her breathing steady. The sound wasn't coming from inside the cabin. It was coming from the hallway. Against every bit of common sense, I slipped out of bed, eased the door open, and peeked outside. The corridor was empty, dimly lit by the soft glow of night lights along the floor, and far down, near the bend that led toward the shops, I saw it again. That faint flicker of light above the elevator. Before I knew it, my feet were carrying me closer, each step heavier than the last. My throat was so dry I could barely swallow. The elevator doors opened without a sound this time, no groan of metal, just silence. Inside, the walls weren't brushed steel anymore. They looked different, rusted. The floor stained, like water had pooled there and never dried. The button glowed faint red again, and beneath my feet, through the open shaft, I swear I felt something moving. Not machinery, not cables, something alive. Then I heard it. A chorus of voices, overlapping, some whispering, some shouting. I couldn't understand the words, but I felt them clawing at me, dragging me toward the open doorway. And then, clear as day, cutting through them all, my own voice. "Come down." I stumbled back so fast I almost tripped. The doors slammed shut like jaws snapping shut. I stood there shaking, heart hammering, when I heard a new sound. Footsteps. I spun around, but the corridor was empty. The sound kept coming, slow, heavy steps, echoing closer until it stopped just a few feet away. The air turned icy, my breath fogging. Then, just at the edge of my vision, I saw a hand press against the wall, pale and thin, before sliding back out of sight. I ran. I didn't stop until I was back in the cabin, locking the door behind me. The next morning, I tried to convince myself I'd dreamed it all. But the bruise on my shoulder, where I'd slammed against the wall while running, was real enough. I told myself I'd stay away, but fate had other plans. Because that afternoon, as we walked past the shops together, my sister stopped suddenly, frowning. "What's that?" she asked, pointing toward the very same corner where the elevator hid. For the first time, she saw it too. The brushed steel door. The flickering light. I didn't answer. I couldn't, because the moment she pointed at it, the elevator opened. And inside, standing perfectly still, was me. Only not. The thing in there wore my face, my clothes, my exact expression, but its eyes were empty, hollow. And it raised its hands slowly, curling one finger, beckoning her inside. My sister screamed, grabbed my arm, and we bolted. People turned to stare, but by the time they looked, just like before, the wall was solid. No door, no elevator. That night, she begged me to explain, but I couldn't. How could I tell her that the ship wasn't just carrying us across the sea? That it was carrying something else too? Something that wanted me specifically? The whispers didn't stop after that, and neither did the sightings. Every night, without fail, the elevator appeared, waiting, and every night, I swore it was just a little closer to my cabin. I stopped sleeping properly after that. Every creak of the ship, every faint groan of the hull, sounded like the opening of elevator doors. My sister wanted to go to the crew, report what we'd seen, but something in me resisted. I kept remembering the way that waiter froze when I'd asked about the corridor. The way the captain's announcement seemed too perfectly timed. I had this sick feeling they already knew. The third night, I woke to find the cabin colder than it should have been. My sister was curled under the blanket, shivering even in her sleep. I sat up, rubbing my arms, and that's when I saw it. The faint red glow. Not from inside the cabin. From outside, seeping under the door. I crept forward and peered through the peephole. The hallway was empty, except it wasn't. Directly across from our door, where there should have been nothing but smooth wall, the elevator waited, doors slightly open, light spilling out like blood. And in that glow, I saw movement. A hand, my hand, pressing against the frame, slowly curling its fingers as if to pry the door wider. I stumbled back so hard my shoulder hit the wall, waking my sister. She gasped when she saw the glow too. Without speaking, she grabbed my arm and pulled me to the balcony. We stood there in the salty night air, trembling, the sound of the waves slapping against the hull below. Neither of us dared look back at the cabin door. By morning, the elevator was gone, but I couldn't shake the thought it wasn't confined to that corridor anymore. It was following me. Later that day, while my sister napped, I tried something desperate. I went down to guest services and asked for a deck plan of the ship. The woman behind the counter smiled politely, handing me a glossy brochure. But when I pressed, asking if there was a maintenance elevator behind the shops, her smile stiffened. "There are no elevators there, sir," I insisted. She leaned closer, lowering her voice. "For your own good," she whispered, "stop looking." And then, without another word, she turned her back and walked away. That night, I couldn't resist. I went to the corridor again. The plants had been moved, as though someone tried to block the space. But the elevator was still there, humming faintly. The doors slid open the second I stepped near. This time, I saw more than shadows. The inside wasn't just rusted steel anymore. It looked endless, a stairwell stretching down, lit by that same sick red glow. The walls lined with peeling wallpaper, handprints smeared dark along the rails. And I heard them, louder than ever. The voices. They weren't whispers anymore. They were calling names. Dozens, maybe hundreds, echoing up the shaft. Some were sobbing, some were screaming. And beneath it all, I heard mine again. "Daniel, Daniel, Daniel, Daniel." I staggered back, nearly tripping. The doors began to close, but just before they sealed shut, something lunged upward. Fast, too fast. A face slamming into the gap. My own. Eyes black as oil, mouth stretched too wide, teeth grinning. "Come down," it hissed. The doors slammed shut. I bolted back to the cabin, but when I threw myself inside, my sister was already awake, pale, staring at the door. "I saw it," she whispered. "It was here, while you were gone." That was the moment I realized. We weren't just being haunted, we were being hunted. And the ship wasn't big enough to run forever. By the fifth night, we were out of excuses. My sister wanted to confront the captain directly, but I knew it wouldn't matter. Every crew member I spoke to had the same hollow warning in their eyes. Don't look, don't ask, don't go near it. But it was too late for us. The elevator wasn't some random anomaly anymore. It had chosen us. That evening, as the sun sank and the ocean swallowed the light, I felt the weight of it before I even saw it. A pressure, like being underwater, pushing against my chest. When I opened the cabin door, there it was, waiting in the hallway, its red glow spilling like blood on the carpet. This time my sister grabbed my hand before I could step closer. "Daniel, please, don't." But the voices were louder now, spilling out into the corridor. I could hear them clearly. Names, hundreds of them. Some sounded American, others foreign. And then, one that froze my veins cold. My sister's. Her own voice, echoing up from the shaft, screaming her name like a plea for help. She went pale. Her grip on me faltered. For a second, I thought she was going to step inside, drawn by the sound of herself. I yanked her back, but that's when the doors fully opened. The space beyond wasn't just a box anymore. It was a hallway. Long, endless, lined with doors on either side. Every door had a number. 823, 910, 1247. Cabin numbers. And from behind those doors, fists pounded, screams rattled. I could hear people begging to be let out. My sister clutched me, whispering, "Those are the missing ones." "Oh God, Daniel, they're still here." I wanted to run, but before I could, someone stepped out. It was me, again. But not like before. This double was older, gaunter, skin pale and wet like it had been submerged. He moved stiffly, eyes wide with something I didn't want to name. He reached toward me, lips parting. "Get in," he croaked, "before it takes her instead." My sister screamed and pulled me backward. I slammed the cabin door, locked it, shoved the dresser against it for good measure. For hours we sat there, shaking, listening. The faint hum of the elevator lingered outside. Every now and then, we heard knocks on the door. Always 3. Always slow. When the knocks finally stopped, we thought maybe it was over. But then, just before dawn, we heard it. Not outside, not in the hall, inside the cabin. The soft hiss of doors sliding open. I spun around, and there, against the wall where my bed had been, stood the elevator, the red glow filling the cabin, swallowing everything. My sister's scream ripped the air, and I grabbed her, but the pull was too strong. It was like the entire room was collapsing into that doorway. The last thing I remember before the world went black was her hand slipping out of mine, her voice screaming my name as she was dragged into the red-lit hall. I woke up alone, not on the ship, not in any cabin. I was in an empty white room with no doors, no windows. The air smelled like salt and rust. On the floor in front of me lay a passenger list. I flipped through it, my hands shaking, page after page of names. Thousands. And there, near the bottom, I saw mine and hers, both crossed out in thick red ink. The walls groaned, metal straining. A faint ding echoed above me. An elevator was coming down. And I realized then I'd never really gotten off that ship. Maybe no one ever does. The first time I saw him, he was sitting alone at the dining table by the window, staring out at the waves as if he'd been waiting for me. His smile was polite, his clothes a little old-fashioned, but there was something in his eyes that unsettled me, like he knew me. I didn't think much of it until later that night, when I overheard the crew whispering that his name wasn't on the manifest, that he'd never boarded the ship at all. My name is Daniel Grant. I'm 38, an accountant from Ohio, and honestly, I booked this cruise because I needed to feel human again. Divorce papers had been signed just a month earlier, and my apartment felt like a tomb. My coworkers practically begged me to take time off, so I did. 7 nights at sea on the Aurora Majesty. The first day was exactly what I expected. Overcrowded pools, the smell of sunscreen and grilled burgers, the endless chatter of happy families. I drank too much at the welcome buffet, fell asleep in a lounge chair, and woke to the sound of steel drums echoing across the deck. It was supposed to be a fresh start, but then came the second day. That was when I noticed him. The man at the window. He wore a cream-colored blazer, the kind you'd imagine from old cruise posters, and a pale blue shirt beneath it. His dark hair was slicked back, though a little messy, and his hands rested perfectly still on the table. He never touched his food. When I caught his eye, he nodded politely, almost like a recognition. I looked away quickly, embarrassed. Maybe he'd just boarded quietly, maybe he liked to eat alone. But later, as I walked back toward my cabin, I passed 2 crew members speaking in hushed tones near the stairwell. No record of him. Then who checked him in? Nobody. That's the problem. I slowed down, listening, but they noticed me and smiled like nothing had happened. Still, the words stuck in my head. No record of him. That night, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. My cabin was comfortable enough, small but clean, with the steady hum of the engines lulling me to sleep. But around 2 a.m., I woke to soft footsteps in the hallway outside. Slow, steady. They stopped right at my door. I held my breath, staring at the sliver of light beneath the door frame. A shadow shifted across it, long and unmoving. I almost called out, but something deep inside screamed not to. And then, slowly, the shadow bent, like someone crouching to peer beneath the door. I whispered to myself, "This isn't happening." But then, from the other side, a voice whispered back, "See you tomorrow, Daniel." The next morning, I tried to convince myself it had been a dream. Maybe the shadow, the whisper. It was just my half-asleep brain twisting sounds from the hallway. But when I walked into the breakfast lounge, he was there again. Same table, same seat, same untouched food. This time, when our eyes met, he actually spoke. "Good morning, Daniel," he said, smiling faintly. His voice was calm, polite, but the sound of my name on his lips made my stomach turn. I had never told him who I was. I forced a smile back. "Morning." Then I quickly moved to a table far away. I wanted to believe maybe he'd overheard my name somewhere, maybe a crew member had said it in passing, but the unease clung to me like fog. After breakfast, I cornered a waiter near the coffee station. A young guy, probably 20, with tired eyes. "Hey," I said casually, pointing toward the window table. "That gentleman over there, cream blazer, blue shirt. Do you know his name?" The waiter glanced over, then frowned. "Sir, there's no one sitting there," I blinked, confused. "What are you talking about? He's right there." But when I looked back, the table was empty. I stammered, "He was just—" The waiter gave me a nervous smile, but his eyes betrayed him. He knew something. "You should enjoy your vacation, sir," he said softly, then walked away quickly. The rest of the day passed in a blur. Sunlight on the deck, music in the atrium, people laughing around the pool. But I couldn't relax. Every time I turned, I swore I caught a glimpse of the cream blazer in the crowd. That evening, during the formal dinner, I saw him again, not seated this time, standing near the staircase, watching me. I marched toward him, determined to get answers. But before I reached him, a crew member stepped right into my path. "Sir, please, this area is for staff only." I glanced past him, and the man in the blazer was gone. Later that night, unable to sleep, I left my cabin and wandered the quieter decks. The ship's hum was louder at night, the hallways dim, the ocean invisible in the dark. That's when I saw it. A door I hadn't noticed before. Narrow, tucked between two maintenance closets. It had no number, no sign, just plain steel with a single handle. And faintly, from behind it, I heard voices. At first, I thought it was crew talking, but the words didn't make sense. They weren't English. The cadence was strange, like chanting. I pressed my ear closer, heart pounding. Then, clear as day, I heard my name. "Daniel." I stumbled back, breath sharp, nearly tripping over myself. The hallway stretched empty behind me. No crew, no passengers, just me. The door rattled suddenly, as if someone inside had slammed against it. The sound echoed down the corridor. I ran. I didn't stop until I was back in my cabin, bolting the door shut. But when I turned, my stomach dropped. On my bed lay a folded cream blazer, my size, and tucked in the breast pocket was a handwritten note. "Tomorrow, your turn." I barely slept that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the cream blazer folded neatly on my bed, the note tucked inside like some kind of invitation or warning. By morning, the blazer was gone. Not misplaced, gone. The bed was perfectly made, like housekeeping had come and scrubbed every trace of it away. But I hadn't left my cabin all night. No one should have been inside. I stormed down to the reception desk. The young woman behind the counter greeted me with a practiced smile. "I need to speak to someone in charge," I demanded. "There's a man on this ship who doesn't belong here. He knows my name. He's been inside my cabin." Her smile faltered. She glanced around quickly, then leaned forward. Her voice dropped. "Sir, it's best not to talk about him." The words chilled me more than denial ever could. Before I could push, a tall man in an officer's uniform appeared at my side, hand on my shoulder. "Let's take a walk, Mr. Grant." His grip was firm, not painful, but I knew better than to fight. He guided me down a quiet hall and into a small office. Inside, he shut the door and lowered his voice. "Whatever you think you've seen, it would be wise to forget it. Passengers sometimes drink too much, let their imagination run wild. Understand?" I stared at him, heart hammering. "So you're saying I imagined a man in a cream blazer who knows my name? I imagined him whispering outside my door at 2 in the morning?" The officer's jaw clenched. He didn't answer. I pressed harder. "Who is he? What is this?" Finally, he leaned in, his voice barely above a whisper. "If you value your life, Mr. Grant, Stay in your cabin tonight. Don't open the door. Don't answer if you hear him." And then, just like that, he left me sitting there, shaking. I returned to the atrium, hoping to lose myself in the crowd, to pretend none of this was real. But when I passed a row of framed photographs on the wall, portraits of the ship's captains through the decades, I froze, because there he was, the man in the cream blazer. Younger but unmistakable. His portrait dated 1965. Captain Richard Hale. A chill ran through me. If he'd been captain in the 60s, then he couldn't still be alive now. That night, I barricaded myself in my cabin with the desk chair against the door. I left the lights on, TV humming low in the background. At 2 a.m., right on cue, the footsteps came. Slow, steady, pausing just outside. I gripped the chair tighter, every nerve screaming. Then came the voice. Calm, patient. "Daniel, open the door." I squeezed my eyes shut. The voice grew sharper, louder. "It's time, Daniel." And then, with a groan of metal, the lock turned on its own. The door swung inward. And standing there was Captain Hale, cream blazer pristine, eyes dark as the ocean outside. "Your turn," he whispered. The instant Captain Hale stepped inside, the air grew heavy, like the oxygen had been sucked out of the room. My chest tightened, and every instinct screamed to run, but my legs wouldn't move. He stood only a few feet away, immaculate blazer buttoned, skin waxy pale as if drained of life. His eyes locked on mine, unblinking, endless. "You shouldn't be here," I whispered. He smiled faintly. "No one should. But once you set foot on this vessel, there's only one way off." My throat was dry. "What do you mean?" He stepped closer. "Every journey requires balance. Every crossing demands a toll. That's why you were chosen." My mind spun. Chosen for what? Behind him, I saw movement in the hallway. Dozens of passengers, silent, filing in, their faces blank, eyes glassy. They weren't alive, not fully. I recognized some of them. The young couple from dinner, the old man I'd seen playing cards, even the receptionist who had warned me. They all stood motionless, waiting. Hale's voice filled the cabin, calm, steady, like he'd said this many times before. When the ocean claims one, the ship sails safe. When the ocean is denied, the ship sinks. That is the law of passage. That is the bargain we honor. It hit me all at once. The disappearances, the whispers, the notes. I wasn't seeing random horrors. I was being prepared, groomed. I was the toll. "No," I said, shaking my head violently. "No, this isn't real. This can't be real." Hale tilted his head. "Do you think you boarded this ship by chance, Daniel? You bought your ticket months ago. Tell me, do you even remember booking it? Or did you simply end up here?" And just like that, my memory faltered. I couldn't picture the moment I bought the ticket. I couldn't remember telling anyone about this trip. I couldn't even recall packing my bag. I had simply woken up here. The walls seemed to pulse with the rhythm of the sea. The silent passengers pressed closer, a circle forming around me. Hale extended his hand. "One step, Daniel. One step, and the rest sail free." I backed against the wall, heart slamming against my ribs. He whispered again, "Your turn." The lights flickered. For a split second, I wasn't in my cabin anymore. I was outside, standing on the edge of the ship's railing, the black ocean yawning below. Wind whipped my face, salt burning my eyes. The passengers were gone. Hale stood beside me, hand still outstretched. "Jump, and you'll finally understand," he said. And in that moment, I realized something even more terrifying than death. The faces of the passengers, the blank stares, the lifeless obedience, they weren't strangers. They were all people who had once refused. They hadn't jumped, they had stayed. And now they were his. The ship groaned, metal twisting like it was alive. I heard voices in the wind, chanting, urging, demanding. I closed my eyes, and when I opened them again, I was gone. Weeks later, another cruise embarked. Families laughing, drinks flowing, the illusion of paradise alive once more. And on the very first night, a young woman entered her cabin to find a folded cream blazer on her bed. Inside the pocket was a note. Your turn. Story 3. The first time I walked past cabin 1031, I thought nothing of it. By the second time, I realized something was wrong. The hallway number skipped from 1030 to 1032. No door, no handle, just a blank stretch of wall. But at night, I swear I heard someone crying from inside. My name is Rachel. I'm 29 and I work as a travel blogger. Cruises are kind of my thing. I review them, photograph them, and write about hidden gems on board. This wasn't my first trip, not by a long shot. I'd sailed with this company 3 times already, but this was the first time I noticed the cabin that shouldn't exist. The first 2 days were exactly what I always tell my readers: food everywhere, endless activities, smiling crew who seemed to work 24/7 without breaking character. I took photos of everything: the marble-floored atrium, the endless buffets with ice sculptures, the top-deck pool glowing neon blue under the night sky. My followers loved it. But I didn't post about cabin 1031, because the first night I walked past that section, I heard it. A faint sound. Not the usual creak of pipes or the hum of the ship's engines. It was softer, rhythmic, like someone sobbing quietly into their hands. I stopped in my tracks, staring at the wall between 1030 and 1032. No door, no number plaque, just metal paneling like any other hallway. But the crying kept going. "Hello," I whispered, immediately regretting it. The sound cut off. Silence. I told myself it had to be thin walls. Cabins weren't perfectly soundproof. Maybe it was someone in 1030 or 1032. Still, the unease lingered with me. The next day, I mentioned it casually to my waiter during lunch. He froze for half a second before smiling again. "There is no 1031, ma'am. You must have been tired. Maybe you misread the numbers." But I hadn't. I know what I saw. That night, I made myself walk the same corridor again. At first, it was just silence. My heart began to settle. Maybe he was right. Maybe I had imagined it. Then, as I passed the blank wall, I heard a whisper. So faint, I almost thought it was my own thoughts at first. "Please, let me out." I froze. The air felt colder, like standing inside a freezer. My phone screen dimmed, then flickered, though I hadn't touched it. I backed away slowly, refusing to turn my back on that wall. Later, in my cabin, I sat shaking, trying to convince myself it was just my brain playing tricks. But when I reviewed the photos I'd taken that day, my stomach dropped. In one of the hallway shots, right between 1030 and 1032, a door was there. Faint, blurry, like it had only half appeared for the camera. And etched into the brass plate above it was a number I wasn't supposed to see. 1031. I couldn't sleep after seeing that photo. I kept replaying it in my head. How could the camera capture something my eyes couldn't? The more I stared at it, the more I noticed strange details. The door wasn't perfectly solid. It looked warped, like it was trying to exist but failing. And that number plate, 1031, it seemed scratched, weathered, as if it had been there for years. By morning, my curiosity had overtaken my fear. I needed answers. I went to guest services, pretending to be casual. "Hey, random question," I said with a laugh. "Why does the hallway on deck 10 skip from 1030 to 1032? Was 1031 just unlucky or something?" The young man at the counter blinked. Then his smile tightened. "There's no missing cabin, ma'am. Perhaps you misread the numbers. Happens more often than you'd think." I pressed. "No, I saw it, and I even have a photo." His face lost color. "Delete that photo." he whispered, voice dropping so low I barely caught it. Then louder, forcing a laugh. Anyway, is there anything else I can help you with? Excursions? Dining reservations? The switch in his tone chilled me. He was scared. That night, I decided to test myself. I returned to the corridor at 2 a.m. The ship was eerily quiet, most passengers asleep, hallways lit by only dim yellow bulbs. My footsteps echoed far too loudly. As I reached the section between 10:30 and 10:32, my phone vibrated in my pocket. A notification, battery critically low, but my phone had been fully charged. I pulled it out. The screen flickered, struggling to stay on, and then, right before my eyes, the wall began to change. The faint outline of a door materialized. Slowly, painfully, like something was pushing it through from the other side of reality. I held my breath. A handle formed. Brass, tarnished with age. I don't know what came over me. I reached out. My fingers hovered inches away. The metal looked freezing cold. Then I heard it again. "Please open it." I yanked my hand back. The voice wasn't a whisper this time. It was right next to my ear. I stumbled back, almost tripping over my own feet. And then, as quickly as it appeared, the door was gone. Just blank wall again. I was shaking, my heart hammering, when I noticed something on the carpet. A key. Old, heavy, brass. Not like the plastic key cards the ship used. And etched on the head of it, numbers scratched deep into the metal. 10:31. The next day, I confronted one of the crew. A housekeeper, middle-aged, kind eyes. She'd seen me loitering near the hallway and whispered, Don't go near that place." "Why?" I asked desperately. She glanced around to make sure no one was listening. "Some cabins, they are sealed. Not because of renovations, not because of luck, because they don't belong here anymore." I frowned. "What does that even mean?" She looked me dead in the eyes. "Sometimes the ship takes things. Cabins, people, memories, and it hides them. But they don't stay hidden forever. They bleed back through. That's what you found." My skin crawled. "Cabin 1031. Her eyes widened. "Don't say the number aloud. If you do, it hears you." Before I could ask more, a supervisor walked by. The housekeeper straightened instantly, muttered, "Excuse me, ma'am," and hurried off. That night, I sat in my cabin, staring at the brass key in my palm. I told myself I wouldn't. I couldn't. But you know how it is. Curiosity eats at you. By 3 a.m., I was back in the hallway. The ship groaned around me, metal expanding and contracting. The key felt hot in my hand now, as if urging me forward. And then, the door appeared again, this time fully solid, as if it had been there all along. My breath caught in my throat. My heart was screaming at me not to. But my hand, it moved anyway. I slid the key into the lock. The moment I turned it, the air in the corridor changed. Heavy, silent. The door clicked open. And beyond it wasn't a cabin. It was a hallway. Dark. Endless. Lined with doors that didn't belong to this ship. Some were rotting wood. Some iron, some painted bright colors from another era. I swear I heard voices behind them, muttering in languages I couldn't recognize. I should have run. I should have slammed the door shut. Instead, I stepped inside. And the door shut itself behind me. The first thing I noticed was the smell. Damp, moldy, like wet stone that hadn't seen sunlight in centuries. The hallway stretched impossibly long, vanishing into darkness, even though my phone flashlight barely cut through it. I whispered to myself, just a trick. Just some kind of maintenance corridor. But even my voice sounded wrong, hollow, like it was being swallowed by the walls. I passed the first door. Its wood was splintered, swollen with moisture. Carved into it were scratches, like fingernails dragging desperately downward. My stomach tightened. I kept walking. The second door had no handle, only a small iron slot, and from behind it, I thought I heard faint breathing. Shallow, ragged. I froze, pressing my ear closer. "Help," a voice rasped. My blood turned to ice. It was a man's voice, weak and desperate. I whispered back, "Who are you?" Silence. Then, a slow, deliberate knock. 3 times. My hand trembled as I backed away. Something in me knew. I wasn't supposed to open it. Further down, the corridor branched slightly. One path looked newer, lit faintly by old bulbs that buzzed overhead. The other path seemed older, covered in shadows, the walls damp and crumbling. I turned left, toward the dim light. After maybe a minute, I saw something that made me stop cold. A suitcase, just sitting in the middle of the hall. Dusty, but not ancient. The kind of luggage you'd see any passenger roll on board. I crouched down, heart pounding, and slowly flipped the tag attached to the handle. It read, "Passenger Rachel Carter. Cabin 923. My breath caught in my throat. It was mine, but I'd left my suitcase in my cabin. When I unzipped it, my hands shook so violently I almost couldn't pull. Inside were my clothes, folded neatly, but older, faded, like they had been rotting here for decades. And tucked between them was something that didn't belong to me, a photo of a man and a woman smiling on the deck of the ship, except the ship looked different, outdated, like it was from the 1960s, and in the background, blurry but visible, was that same door number, 1031. I dropped the photo. My head was spinning. The lights above me flickered, then went out completely. I was left in darkness. And in that silence, I heard footsteps, not mine, behind me, slow, measured, coming closer. I swung my phone flashlight around, hands shaking so bad the beam jittered wildly across the walls. Nothing, just the corridor stretching empty. But the footsteps didn't stop. I backed up, pressing against the damp wall. My phone buzzed suddenly, vibrating in my hand. A notification appeared on the black screen. 1 new voice memo saved. But I hadn't recorded anything. I tapped it open. The playback began immediately, and my heart nearly stopped, because it was me, my voice. "If you find this recording, it means I didn't make it out. Don't follow the voices. Don't open the wrong door. The ship doesn't let go once it chooses you." The recording ended abruptly, cut off by static. I dropped the phone in panic. When I picked it back up, the screen glitched, showing lines of text I didn't type. "You shouldn't be here," I gasped. My pulse thundered in my ears. The walls felt closer, breathing almost. And for the first time, I realized I wasn't just lost. I was being watched. I stumbled back toward where I thought the original door had been, but the hallway twisted in impossible ways now, branching into corners that hadn't been there before. The doors all looked different, but some had faint numbers scratched into them, numbers that didn't belong on this ship at all. Cabin 212, Cabin 45, Cabin 7A, cabins that shouldn't even exist on this deck. And from behind those doors, whispers, growing louder. My vision blurred as panic took over. I slammed my hands against the walls, searching for the way out, my breath ragged. Then one door at the far end creaked open on its own. Just a sliver, just enough for light to spill through. And a figure stood there. A woman, pale, eyes sunken, dressed in a dated gown, yellowed with age. She looked straight at me, and then she smiled. "We've been waiting for you." The door flung open wide, and I swear, I saw the ocean, not calm waters, not waves, but a black, endless sea stretching into nothingness, filled with voices crying out from below. The woman stepped aside, gesturing for me to enter. My whole body screamed to run, but something stronger pulled me forward. Because as I looked into that impossible ocean, I saw myself standing there. Another me. waiting. I don't know if it was me moving toward the door or the door pulling me in. My legs felt like they weren't mine anymore, like strings were being yanked by something I couldn't see. The pale woman's hand lifted, and I swear the air itself pushed at my back, urging me forward. My nails dug into the damp wall, scraping until they bled, but the force was too strong. The ocean beyond the door shifted unnaturally, waves rising without sound, the water blacker than night, its surface rippling as if thousands of shapes writhed beneath it. Faces pressed up against it, mouths opening in silent screams. I whispered, "No, no, this isn't real." But the other version of me, standing at the edge of that water, lifted her head. Her eyes were hollow, her smile cracked wide, unnatural. She reached out her hand toward me, and that was when every door in the hallway slammed open at once. The whispers became screams. Men, women, children, all crying out. I glimpsed pale hands clawing through the gaps, bodies writhing in the shadows, reaching for me. The whole hallway shuddered, like the ship itself was alive and angry. I screamed and bolted back the way I came. My phone's flashlight flickered wildly, cutting in and out, showing me glimpses of faces pressed against the walls, of shadows darting just out of sight. Finally, after what felt like running for hours, I saw it. The original door, just barely visible in the dark. I slammed into it, shoving with all my weight. For a horrible second, it wouldn't budge. Then, with a deafening crack, it burst open, and I stumbled into blinding white light. I was back in the normal corridor. The carpet, the polished walls, the low hum of the ship's engines. I collapsed, gasping, tears streaking down my face. A crew member rounded the corner, eyes narrowing when he saw me. "Ma'am, are you all right?" I tried to speak, but my throat was raw. I could only point back at the door. He glanced behind me, then frowned. "There's nothing there." I spun around. He was right. Where door 1031 had been, there was just smooth wall, no sign of anything. He radioed for help as I staggered to my feet. They insisted I was dehydrated, maybe disoriented. They walked me back to my cabin, gave me water, told me to rest, but when I stepped inside, I froze. My suitcase sat on the bed, only it wasn't the one I had brought on the ship. It was the faded, rotting one from the hallway. The one that had my name tag, and tucked under the handle was the same photo, the couple on the deck of the ship from decades ago. Only now, there was someone else in the picture, me. Standing beside them, smiling, dressed in the same pale gown as the woman in the hallway. My stomach lurched. I screamed, shoving the suitcase across the room, but the crew rushed in, restraining me, telling me nothing was wrong. They said I'd imagined it. They said stress plays tricks. But I knew the truth. That night, I locked myself in my cabin, shaking in my bed until exhaustion finally dragged me under. And at exactly 3 a.m., the intercom crackled to life. "Passenger Rachel Carter, please proceed to cabin 1031. I sat frozen, clutching the sheets, heart slamming so hard it hurt. The voice repeated, over and over, each time closer, each time sharper, until it wasn't coming from the speaker anymore. It was coming from the other side of my door. And when I finally looked up, I saw the shadows seeping through the cracks, long fingers curling across the floor. I don't remember screaming. I just remember the door opening. And then, nothing. The next morning, my cabin was empty. The crew insisted no one had been assigned to room 923 that voyage. My name wasn't on the manifest. My ticket didn't exist. But some passengers swear they saw me, eating at breakfast, sitting by the pool, walking the decks. And late at night, when they pass by a section of wall on the lower deck that feels colder than the rest, they hear it, faint, like a whisper leaking through from the other side. Please proceed to cabin 1031. Story 4. They say the ocean doesn't forget. I didn't believe that until the night the sea called my name. My name's Daniel Rivera. I'm 32, a high school history teacher from Florida. Last summer, I booked a cruise, the Aurora Voyage, to celebrate the end of a long school year. I wasn't rich, but I'd saved enough to finally give myself a proper vacation, sunshine, buffets, and a week without grading papers. That was all I wanted. The ship looked like a floating city when I first saw it. Glass towers, polished decks, families waving from balconies. Everyone seemed excited, snapping photos, clinking drinks. It felt safe, alive, full of laughter. I even remember telling myself, this trip might change me. I just didn't know how right I was. The first day was normal. Too normal. Dinner at the Grand Hall, a cheesy comedy show, kids running around the pool deck. I met a few passengers at my table, an older couple from Ohio, a young guy traveling alone, a quiet woman who didn't speak much. They were nice enough. But every time I looked toward the far corner of the dining hall, my eyes landed on a group of crew members. They weren't eating, they weren't laughing, just sitting still, all staring at the same silver pocket watch placed in the middle of their table. I remember laughing it off. Probably a crew game, I told myself, but even then, my gut twisted. That night, as I walked to my cabin, I noticed something off. The hallway felt colder than the rest of the ship. The air smelled faintly of salt water, stronger than it should have been inside. On cabin doors, faint marks, like scratches or carvings, caught the light. I stopped at one, traced it with my finger. It was a circle with a line through it. When I blinked, it was gone. Just smooth wood. I told myself I was overtired, but as I slipped into bed, I swear I heard voices echoing through the vent. Whispers, layered over each other. Not English. Not any language I knew. The next morning, the fog came. Thick, unnatural, swallowing the horizon. We couldn't see the ocean, couldn't see the sun. The cruise director made an announcement, cheerful voice cracking slightly. Nothing to worry about, folks. Just a little sea mist. But if you've ever seen fog over open water, you know. This wasn't mist. This was a wall. At breakfast, the Ohio couple looked shaken. The husband leaned toward me and whispered, "This isn't the first time. The Aurora, she goes missing. Every few years." His wife grabbed his hand hard, shushing him, eyes darting around the dining hall. I laughed nervously, but I noticed something. Every crew member was watching us, not smiling, not blinking, just watching. That night, I couldn't sleep. At exactly 2:13 a.m., I heard it. 3 knocks on my cabin door, slow, deliberate. I froze, every muscle in my body locking up. Then came the whisper, "Daniel!" I didn't move, didn't breathe. But when I finally forced myself to check, the hallway was empty. Only the endless fog pressing against the porthole. I thought I was losing it. Until I saw the bathroom mirror. Words smeared across it, written in moisture. 5 simple words, don't let them choose you. My hands shook as I wiped it clean, heart pounding so hard I thought I'd faint. And then, just as I turned away, the words appeared again, fresh, dripping. That's when I realized whoever had written it wasn't inside my room. They were inside the mirror. So I need to ask you, if you were trapped on a ship where the sea itself knows your name, would you fight to escape or accept that you'd already been chosen? I didn't sleep the rest of that night. Every shadow in the cabin felt alive, every creak of the ship's hull like something breathing right outside my door. By morning, I was exhausted. My reflection in the bathroom mirror looked pale, eyes sunken, but the words were gone, wiped clean as if they'd never been there. I convinced myself it had to be some kind of prank. Maybe one of the cleaning staff, or a drunk passenger messing with me. That excuse kept me calm long enough to join the day's activities. There was trivia by the pool, a karaoke contest, even a cooking demonstration. Everyone seemed determined to pretend nothing was wrong. But the fog hadn't lifted. It pressed against the windows, white and suffocating, blocking out the world. No horizon, no sun. Just us, suspended in a colorless void. I overheard people whispering, "Are we still moving? Is the ship even going anywhere?" At lunch, I sat with the quiet woman from the first night. She finally spoke, her voice low and raspy. "You saw it, didn't you?" she asked. "Saw what?" I forced a laugh. "The writing." Her eyes locked on mine. "It comes for the ones they mark." Before I could respond, a crew member appeared behind her. Tall, stiff, smiling too wide. He placed a hand on her shoulder and said, "Miss, you've been requested at the bridge." She froze, visibly trembling, and just like that, she was escorted away. She didn't come back for dinner. That evening, announcements went on as usual. "Don't miss tonight's dance party on Deck 5. Bingo in the lounge at 9. The fake cheerfulness grated on me, because by then half the passengers from my dining table were gone. Their chairs simply empty. No explanation. No one talked about it. The Ohio husband avoided my eyes. The young guy traveling alone just stared into his drink. I finally asked, "Where is everyone?" He looked at me, lips trembling, and whispered, "Offerings." Then he stood up and walked away, leaving his food untouched. Later, restless, I wandered the upper decks. That's when I saw it. A line of crew members in the fog, silhouettes moving in unison. They carried something heavy, struggling to lift it over the railing. A muffled cry broke through the silence. Then a splash. I wanted to scream. I wanted to run to them. But my legs locked in place. And then, as if they sensed me, all their heads turned at once. Dozens of faces staring straight into the fog, into me. I stumbled back to my cabin, chest tight, barely able to breathe. Inside, I tried to convince myself I'd imagined it. But when I turned on the cabin light, my stomach dropped. The mirror. The words were back, only this time they'd changed. "You're next." My hands shook so badly I dropped the glass of water I was holding. I wanted to smash the mirror, but something inside me knew it wouldn't matter. Whatever wrote those words wasn't inside the glass. It was inside the ship. I sat against the wall, clutching my phone, but there was no signal. No GPS. Nothing but the low hum of engines and the endless whisper of the sea. That's when the knock came again. 3 slow knocks, followed by the sound of my name, dragged out in a voice that didn't sound human. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. But then I realized something. The voice wasn't coming from the hallway. It was coming from inside the mirror. So tell me, if your reflection called your name in the dead of night, would you dare answer it? I didn't sleep after that. I sat frozen, watching the mirror as if it might move on its own. Hours dragged until morning announcements blared over the speakers. "Good morning, passengers. Breakfast buffet is open on Deck 9. Weather's looking perfect for another day at sea." Perfect weather? That was the lie that shook me the most. There was no sun, no sky, only fog. I stumbled out, desperate to see other people, to feel less insane. The hallways were almost empty. Cabin doors that should have been open for cleaning were shut. I passed one door, 1026, and caught the faintest sound from inside. Not talking, not movement, it was chanting. Low, rhythmic, like many voices whispering in unison. I backed away fast, heart pounding. Breakfast felt no safer. The buffet line was half-stocked, like supplies were running low. The crew kept smiling, too wide, too fake. I noticed their eyes never blinked. They moved smoothly, like actors repeating a script they'd performed 100 times. I sat down with the young traveler, the only familiar face left. His hands shook so badly he spilled his orange juice. "They're taking people," he whispered, "at night. If your cabin's marked, you're chosen." "Chosen for what?" I asked. He looked around nervously. "For the sea." Before I could push him further, a crew member in white gloves appeared at our table. "Sir, the captain would like to speak with you privately." His tone wasn't a request, it was a command. The young man's face went white. He shook his head, muttering, "No, no, please." but 2 more crew members appeared, gripping his arms. He screamed once, a sharp, raw sound, and then he was gone. The entire dining hall carried on like nothing had happened. Forks clinking. Small talk. Smiles. That night, I bolted my cabin door and shoved a chair against it. I sat awake, clutching a makeshift weapon, a broken lamp. I thought maybe I could make it until morning, but the mirror had other plans. At first, the glass only rippled, like water disturbed by a pebble. Then, a pale hand pressed against the inside, fingers scraping as though it were trying to break through. My own reflection faded, replaced by something else, something with my face but hollow eyes. And then it spoke. Not out loud, but inside my skull. It's easier if you don't fight. I dropped the lamp and staggered back. My double smirked, and behind it I saw shapes. Dozens of them. Faces I recognized. The Ohio wife. The quiet woman. The young man dragged from breakfast. All staring from inside the glass. Mouths moving in silent screams. The knock came again. 3 slow knocks. Only this time, they didn't come from the door or the mirror. They came from underneath my bed. I grabbed the chair and shoved it aside, fumbling for the handle. But when I opened the door, the hallway wasn't there. Instead, I was standing on the open deck. Fog swirled around me, thick and alive. And at the center of it, a circle of crew members in white gloves, chanting. In their hands, something writhed, a body. My blood turned to ice when I realized it wasn't a stranger. It was me. They were holding me, limp and unresisting, carrying me toward the railing. I looked down at my own hands, but they were see-through. My heart stuttered. My breath didn't fog the air. I wasn't standing there. I was trapped somewhere else. And then I felt it. The cold glass pressing against my back. The mirror had me. So tell me, if you saw yourself being sacrificed to the sea, would you try to stop it? Or would you wonder which you they're really throwing overboard? The fog pressed close, swallowing sound. Crew voices droned like a hymn, chanting words I couldn't recognize but felt deep in my bones. My limp body, the other me, was lifted onto the railing. I screamed, but it came out as silence. My ghostly hands passed right through one of the crew as I tried to claw at him. They didn't see me. They only saw the version of me they were carrying. The captain stood at the center, tall and rigid, his cap pulled low. When he finally lifted his gaze, I realized his eyes weren't human. They were the same shifting gray as the fog, endless and hollow. This ship sails only because the sea is fed, he intoned. And tonight, the sea takes him. The crew pushed my body overboard. I expected a splash, thrashing water, something, but there was no sound at all. My body simply disappeared into the mist, swallowed like it had never existed. Suddenly, everything around me shifted. The deck dissolved into black water. The chanting became muffled sobs, and I was surrounded, not by crew, not by passengers, but by the lost. Faces floated around me in the dark sea, their eyes wide, their mouths opening and closing in silent pleas. The Ohio wife's hand brushed my arm. The young traveler's eyes locked onto mine. Dozens more reached out, their skin pale and bloated as though they'd been under for years. "You're one of us now," they whispered in unison, though no mouths moved. I thrashed, trying to swim upward, but there was no surface, only more darkness, more faces. Then I felt a tug, something wrapping around my ankle. I looked down and saw ropes, thick and slick with seawater, pulling me deeper. At the end of them were the crew, their smiles glowing faintly underwater, their white gloves pristine even here. "No," I gasped, though no bubbles escaped. "I'm not supposed to be here. I didn't board this cruise to die." That was when my reflection appeared in front of me again, clear even in the water. My hollow-eyed double smiled. "You already did." I woke, or thought I did, in my cabin. The lamp was whole again. The bed was neatly made. Sunlight streamed through the curtains. For one blissful second, I thought it was all a nightmare. Then I opened the mirror. It wasn't glass anymore. It was water, rippling gently, and on the other side, I saw the ship. But this time, It was leaving, and I was not on it. Instead, I stood in endless fog, barefoot on wet sand. The ocean stretched black and infinite, but there was no sound of waves, only silence. And from behind me, dozens of voices began whispering, all at once, merging into one thought. The ship will return. It always does. And when it does, you'll help us welcome the next passengers. Now I ask you, if you were me, would you pray never to see that ship again? Or would you fear what happens if it sails without you? The first time I heard the ship speakers whisper my cabin number, I thought it was a dream. The second time, it called out another passenger right before she vanished. By the third night, the voice wasn't just whispering from the ceiling anymore. It was standing outside my door, wearing my face. My name's Derek. I'm 32 years old, and I work in IT security for a hospital in Virginia. I don't usually take vacations, but my sister had insisted I join her on this cruise as a way to finally disconnect. She booked both our cabins side by side. She wanted us to spend time together, make up for years of barely seeing each other. I'll admit, I wasn't sold on the idea at first, but something about the ocean, the thought of being away from screens, alarms, constant emails, it tempted me. And I guess that's why I'm here, sitting in a floating hotel the size of a city. The first day was exactly what people imagine a cruise should be. Sunlight glinting off the water like glass, the smell of salt in the air, music echoing from the pool deck, waiters carrying trays of colorful drinks. My sister and I explored almost every corner. Buffet halls stacked with food, theater lounges, art galleries, even a cigar bar tucked away at the very top. It felt safe, normal. I kept thinking maybe she was right. Maybe this was exactly what I needed. But then that night, as I lay in bed with the hum of the engine lulling me towards sleep, I heard it. The ship's intercom crackled softly, the way it did before announcements, but no voice came at first. Just static. Then, faintly, almost like a breath sliding into the room, I heard it, "Cabin 726. That was my cabin. My heart kicked, but I laughed it off. Probably some glitch. Maybe the speaker's leaking sound from a different floor. Still, the hair on my arms stood on end. I remember staring at the vent above the bed, convinced the sound had come from there, not the ceiling speakers. The next morning, I brushed it off. Didn't tell my sister. Didn't want to sound crazy. We had breakfast, pancakes dripping with syrup, omelets made to order, and planned to hit the excursion desk. Everything seemed fine, too fine, like the ship was working overtime to erase what I'd heard. That second night, it happened again. Same static, the same uneasy pause. But this time, the whisper wasn't my cabin. It was another number. Cabin 514. I didn't think much of it until the next morning when my sister nudged me at breakfast and whispered, "Did you hear? Some woman went missing last night. Her cabin, 514. That's when my stomach dropped. I told myself it was coincidence. It had to be. Maybe I'd misheard the number. Maybe it was gossip. But I couldn't shake the image of that faint voice curling through the speaker like smoke. By the third night, I didn't even want to sleep. I stayed awake, lights dim, eyes fixed on the ceiling vent. When the crackle started, I felt my throat tighten. The whisper came again. But this time, it wasn't a cabin number. It was my name. Derek. My blood ran cold. The voice wasn't echoing from above anymore. It was right outside my door. I froze, straining to listen. And then I heard something I can't ever forget. Knuckles. Slow, deliberate knocks on the door. And after the last knock, the sound of my own voice whispering back at me. Let me in. I didn't open the door. I couldn't. My entire body locked up as if even the smallest movement might give me away. I lay there, perfectly still, with only the sound of my own shallow breathing filling the cabin. The knock stopped after a moment, but the silence that followed felt even worse. Then, softly, like the scrape of skin on metal, I heard someone, or something, dragging a hand down the length of my door. A faint hiss of air whistled from the bottom gap, almost like something was breathing right against it. I stayed awake until the first sliver of dawn filtered through the curtains. Only then did I dare to move. When I opened the door that morning, the hallway looked completely normal. No signs of anyone standing there all night. But when I bent down, I noticed faint smudges along the bottom edge of the door, as though oily fingerprints had been pressed there and dragged slowly down. At breakfast, my sister complained about the service being slower that morning. She joked that maybe half the staff had overslept. I kept quiet, but as I scanned the room, I realized something strange. The crew really did seem thinner. Whole tables sat uncleared. Corners of the buffet were closed, and some passengers were missing. "Where's that couple from dinner last night?" my sister asked. "The ones from Florida? The older guy and his wife?" I hadn't noticed until she said it, but their seats at the window were empty. Plates and silverware set, but no one sitting there. That's when the intercom clicked. Everyone froze for a moment. Usually it was cheerful music or a standard announcement about activities. But this time the speakers crackled with nothing but faint static. People shifted nervously in their seats. Then a voice, calm, male, professional, said, "Good morning, passengers. Please disregard any rumors. All scheduled activities will continue as normal." That was it. Short. Too short. And the way he'd said, "disregard any rumors," made my skin crawl. Like they knew something we didn't. Later that afternoon, I confronted one of the crew members, a young woman, at the guest services desk. I asked her about the missing passengers, but the moment I mentioned cabin 514, her smile faltered. She glanced quickly toward a uniformed officer standing nearby before replying, "Sir, I'm afraid I can't discuss other guests. Is there anything else I can help you with?" Her tone was polite, but her eyes told another story. They darted to the officer again, and I swear I saw fear in them. That night, I decided I couldn't stay in my cabin alone. I knocked on my sister's door and asked if I could crash on her couch for a bit. She laughed at me, but she didn't say no. We stayed up late, talking, watching movies on the small flat screen. For a while, I felt safe, but sometime after midnight, while she slept, I heard it again. The static, the whisper. This time, it didn't come from the ceiling. It came from the television, even though it was turned off. The black screen flickered faintly, like static trying to break through. And through that low hum, I heard my name again, Derek. Only this time, another voice joined in, my sister's name. I sat frozen, staring at the screen, praying she wouldn't wake up to hear it. Because if she did, I didn't know if she'd ever believe it was real. The next morning, she was gone. I tore through her cabin that morning, calling her name, checking the bathroom, the closet, even under the bed like some desperate child. Nothing. Her clothes were still neatly folded in her suitcase. Her shoes sat by the door. It was as if she had simply stepped out and vanished into the air. I sprinted down the hallway, nearly colliding with two crew members. They steadied me with forced smiles, but when I shouted that my sister was missing, both of their faces hardened instantly. One of them muttered something under his breath in another language, while the other put a hand on my shoulder. "Sir, please keep your voice down. We'll look into it. Passengers get lost sometimes. The ship is very large." Lost? My sister wasn't a child wandering off at the mall. She was meticulous, careful. She never just disappeared. I pushed past them, heart pounding, and rushed to the nearest stairwell. I didn't know where I was going, only that I had to keep moving, searching. Everywhere I went, the ship felt off. Hallways that seemed to stretch longer than before, corners that turned into dead ends, doors that led nowhere. I tried to retrace the route to the atrium, but somehow, I ended up in a section I'd never seen before. A narrow corridor with peeling paint, dim lighting, and no other passengers in sight. That's where I heard it again, the whisper. Not from a speaker this time, from directly behind me. Derek. I spun around so fast I nearly tripped over myself. The corridor was empty, but at the far end, just for a split second, I thought I saw someone step around the corner. Someone wearing my clothes. Someone who moved exactly like me. I didn't chase it. I couldn't. Instead, I backed up into a stairwell, heart hammering against my ribs, my mind screaming that I was losing it. I finally forced myself back to guest services. I demanded to speak to the captain, the security officer, anyone. The same young woman from before stood at the desk. Her smile was thinner this time, her hands trembling slightly as she typed something on her keyboard. "Sir," she said softly, leaning forward, "if you want answers, don't ask here. Go to deck 3. At midnight, the crew mess hall. Don't let anyone follow you." I opened my mouth to ask more, but she immediately straightened and plastered the fake smile back on as another passenger approached. I spent the rest of the day in a fog, wandering the ship, watching families splash in the pool, couples clink wine glasses, entertainers strum guitars in the lounges. No one else seemed to notice that people were disappearing. No one seemed to care that announcements had turned shorter, sharper, more mechanical. By the time midnight came, I was a wreck. My hands shook as I made my way down to deck 3, a level passengers weren't supposed to go. The corridors down there were different. Plain metal walls, humming pipes, the faint smell of grease and seawater. I found the mess hall. A single fluorescent light buzzed overhead. Inside sat half a dozen crew members, their faces pale, their uniforms wrinkled. They all stopped talking the moment I entered. The young woman from the desk waved me over. "You shouldn't be here," one of the others hissed. "He deserves to know," she snapped back. Then she turned to me. "Listen carefully. This ship doesn't sail like other ships. Every few nights, it takes someone. Passengers, crew. It chooses. And the voices you're hearing, they're not a malfunction. They're the ship calling its next offering." My blood turned to ice. She leaned in closer, her voice dropping to a whisper. "Your sister's name was called. There's nothing you can do to stop it, but you can still save yourself if you leave before the final night." I asked her what the hell that meant, but before she could answer, the intercom above us crackled to life. Static filled the room. Then, clear as day, it spoke again. "Derek." All the crew froze, their eyes wide with terror. One of them whispered, "It's too late." The moment my name echoed through the intercom, something inside me snapped. I pushed back from the table, shaking my head, refusing to believe it. "No, this is insane. It's just some sick prank. Or you people are messing with me." But the crew didn't argue. They didn't try to convince me. They just stared at me like someone stares at a dead man walking. The young woman whispered, "You should run." I stumbled out of the mess hall, every nerve in my body screaming. The hall seemed to warp around me, stretching longer, turning at impossible angles. I could hear footsteps behind me, slow, deliberate, perfectly in sync with mine. When I stopped, they stopped. When I ran, they sped up. By the time I burst into the main atrium, the ship was eerily quiet. No music, no laughter, no clinking glasses. Dozens of empty chairs and abandoned drinks, as if every single passenger had stood up and left at once. "Hello?" My voice cracked. "Is anyone there?" That's when I saw her, my sister. Standing at the far end of the atrium, relief surged through me so fast it almost made me dizzy. "Oh my God, where have you been?" "I thought you were..." She raised her head. Her eyes were wrong. Too dark, too hollow. And when she smiled, it wasn't her smile. The intercom hissed overhead, and the voice whispered again. "Derek, let me in." My sister's mouth moved in perfect sync with it. I backed away, heart hammering against my ribs, but no matter which direction I turned, the ship shifted. Hallways closed in on themselves. Stairs led back to where I started. Every screen flickered with static, and every whisper I heard now was my own voice, echoing back at me from every direction. I don't know how long I ran. Hours, maybe. Days? The windows showed nothing but endless night. No stars, no moon, just black water stretching forever. Eventually, I ended up back at my own cabin. The door stood open. Inside, the bed was neatly made, the curtains drawn, and sitting on the edge of the bed was me. He looked up, same face, same clothes, same trembling hands. He smiled weakly like we shared some awful secret. "It's easier if you don't fight," he whispered. I stumbled back into the hall, but it didn't matter. Every door I opened led to the same cabin. Every mirror I passed reflected a version of me that wasn't quite right. Some grinning, some crying, some whispering words I couldn't understand. The last thing I remember is the intercom crackling one final time, the voice no longer whispering. It spoke in a calm, steady tone, the same way the captain's announcements used to sound. "Ladies and gentlemen, we welcome our newest permanent passenger, Derek of cabin 726. And then, nothing. That was weeks ago. Months? I don't know anymore. I'm still here. Still walking these halls that twist and repeat. Sometimes I hear laughter, music, clinking glasses, like echoes of a cruise still happening somewhere just beyond reach. But the faces I see now aren't passengers. They're copies. Reflections. If you're hearing this recording, if it somehow made it off this ship, remember one thing: when the intercom calls your name, don't answer. Don't even breathe. Because once it knows you, there's no way out.